Detective Adam Reynolds had always believed Clearwater was different. It wasn't a perfect town, no place ever was, but it was the kind of place where neighbors knew each other's birthdays and left their doors unlocked at night. Adam had spent 20 years walking its streets, first as a fresh-faced patrol officer and later as a seasoned detective. He had earned respect the old-fashioned way, by listening more than he spoke and standing up when it mattered most. But lately, things had begun to feel different. It started with whispers. A father quietly pulled Adam aside after church one Sunday. A worried teacher mentioned odd patrol visits to immigrant families' homes. A store clerk talked about officers asking too many questions, making too many assumptions. At first, Adam told himself it was nothing, just misunderstandings, coincidences. After all, he knew his fellow officers. Didn't he? Still, a knot tightened in his stomach. It all came to a head on a rainy Thursday afternoon. Adam was finishing paperwork at the station when a call came in, a noise complaint at a small house on Maple Street, home to the Hernandez family. Dispatch sounded uneasy. "We're sending backup, but it's probably nothing," the young voice said. Adam stood up, grabbing his jacket. "I'll check it out myself," he said, before anyone else could. He knew the Hernandez family. Manuel and Rosa were hard-working people, proud owners of a tiny grocery store on the edge of town. Their kids, Sofia and Mateo, were quiet, polite, always helping stock shelves after school. Adam had no doubt they weren't causing trouble. When he arrived, rain tapping gently on his windshield, Adam spotted 2 squad cars already outside the Hernandez home. His heart sank. Officer Darrell Pike and Sergeant Cole Jennings stood on the porch, talking fast and loud. The front door was open. Inside, he could see Rosa clutching Sofia, who was crying. Adam parked quickly and got out. "What's going on?" he asked, keeping his voice calm but firm. Darrell Pike turned with a smirk. "Noise complaint," he said. "Neighbors said there was shouting. We're making sure everything's legal." Adam's eyes narrowed. The way Pike said legal made it clear what he meant. Clearwater had quietly started collaborating with federal immigration authorities over the past year, something Adam had questioned more than once. Now it seemed that some officers were taking that partnership as a green light to intimidate. "I'll handle it," Adam said sharply. Jennings looked like he wanted to argue but thought better of it. Slowly, both men stepped back toward their cars, muttering under their breath. Adam turned to Rosa, offering a reassuring smile. "Mrs. Hernandez," he said gently, "is everything all right?" Rosa wiped Sofia's tears with trembling hands. "Everything is fine, Detective," she whispered. "We were just playing music. Mateo got a good grade at school. We were celebrating." She hesitated. "But they said we don't have the right paperwork." Adam's stomach twisted. He knelt to Sofia's level. "You have every right to celebrate," he said. "Don't worry. No one's taking you anywhere." He stood and glanced at the other officers, now sitting in their cars, pretending not to watch. Something was wrong, deeply wrong, and it went beyond a few overzealous cops. Later that evening, Adam sat at his kitchen table, a cold cup of coffee in his hands. The rain had stopped, leaving everything outside quiet and still. He replayed the afternoon over and over. The fear on Rosa's face, Sofia's tears, the smug look on Pike's face. It all pointed to one conclusion he could no longer ignore. Some of his own brothers in blue were abusing their power. And the Hernandez family wouldn't be the last. Adam made a decision. He wasn't going to look the other way. Not this time. He pulled out a notepad and began writing names, incidents, anything he could remember that hadn't felt right over the past few months. He wasn't sure where this would lead, but he knew one thing. If he didn't stand up now, Clearwater would lose more than just its good reputation. It would lose its soul. Outside, the town lights flickered under the damp sky. Inside, Detective Adam Reynolds steeled himself for the fight ahead. The next morning, Clearwater seemed to hum with a quiet tension. Adam Reynolds felt it the moment he stepped out of his truck and crossed the precinct parking lot. A few officers nodded at him as usual, but others, ones he once considered friends, barely made eye contact. Whispers floated just out of reach. Doors closed a little faster as he passed. Adam wasn't surprised. Word traveled fast in small towns, especially when people sensed someone was asking the wrong questions. He pushed open the heavy glass doors of the station and headed straight to the records room. If he was going to build a case, he needed more than gut feelings. He needed proof. The records clerk, an older woman named Marcia, looked up from her desk with a polite smile. "Detective Reynolds," she said. "Looking for something special today?" Adam leaned casually against the counter. "Just catching up on incident reports," he said lightly. Thought I'd review some cases from the past few months. Noise complaints, public disturbances, that kind of thing. Marcia hesitated, tapping her pen against her notepad. There's been a lot more of those lately, she said softly, almost to herself. Then she met Adam's eyes. I'll pull the files for you. 15 minutes later, Adam sat at a corner desk with 2 thick folders. He flipped through the reports, page after page, and the pattern emerged almost immediately. Nearly all the noise complaints and disturbances involved immigrant families with no history of trouble, no prior calls against them. Always the same officers responding. Always vague accusations, loud music, suspicious gatherings, loitering. Adam frowned. Some reports didn't even have complete narratives, just quick notes and a case closed stamp. Sloppy work or deliberate. He scribbled notes furiously, feeling the weight of it all pressing down. This wasn't just misconduct. It was targeted harassment. And he was certain now, the Hernandez family had been marked. Later that afternoon, Adam drove across town to an old, weathered diner where retired officers liked to gather. He found Frankie Malloy, a man who had worn the badge for 30 years before retiring 2 years ago. Frankie was sharp, observant, and, most importantly, he had nothing to lose. Adam Reynolds, Frankie said, raising a bushy eyebrow as Adam slid into the booth across from him. Haven't seen you here in a while. I need your advice, Adam said, lowering his voice. Frankie studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Adam laid it out carefully, not accusing anyone by name, just painting a picture. Targeted stops. Unnecessary investigations. Fear spreading among families who had done nothing wrong. Frankie leaned back, sighing heavily. I heard rumors, he said. Even before I retired. New folks coming in, pushing for tougher measures. No oversight. No accountability. Some of the higher-ups liked the idea of making an example, especially if it scored them political points. Adam felt a chill settle over him. So it's bigger than just a few bad apples, he said. Frankie gave a humorless chuckle. It usually is. They sat in silence for a while, the clatter of dishes and low hum of conversation filling the space around them. Finally, Frankie leaned forward. You be careful, Adam, he said quietly. You start pulling at loose threads around here, you'll find yourself standing alone real fast. Adam nodded. I know. But he also knew he couldn't walk away. Later, driving home as the sky turned a soft pink with the setting sun, Adam realized he needed help. He couldn't fight this alone. He needed allies, but the right ones. People he could trust beyond doubt. 2 names came to mind immediately, Officer Lila Grant and Sergeant Marcus Boone. Lila was young but fiercely principled. She had once stood up to a senior officer over an unfair traffic stop and had the scars to prove it. Boone was a quiet, steady presence, a man who believed in the old ways, when a badge meant protection, not power. Adam parked outside his modest brick house and pulled out his phone. First, he called Lila. Detective Reynolds, she answered, sounding surprised. I need to meet, he said simply. Someplace private. There was a pause, then her voice firmed. Name the time and place. He smiled despite the seriousness of it all. He wasn't alone after all. An hour later, the 3 of them gathered at Boone's small workshop behind his house, a place where no one would think to look. Adam laid it all out. The reports, the Hernandez incident, his suspicions. When he finished, silence filled the room. Boone was the first to speak. I've seen things too, he said slowly. Things that didn't sit right. I wanted to believe it was just isolated. Lila's fists clenched. They're targeting families who can't fight back, she said, and using fear to cover it up. Adam nodded. We have 2 choices, he said. Look the other way, or stand up. The decision wasn't easy, but it was clear. They would stand. Outside, the stars blinked to life over Clearwater, indifferent to the quiet promise made in that small workshop. Inside, 3 honest officers prepared for the battle ahead, not with weapons or anger, but with truth, patience, and determination. Because some fights were worth everything. The following week felt like moving through a storm without rain, the kind where the air crackles with unseen tension. Detective Adam Reynolds kept his routine the same. Early mornings at the precinct, coffee from the same corner cafe, paperwork at his usual desk. From the outside, nothing had changed. But behind the scenes, everything had. Each night after work, Adam met secretly with Lila Grant and Marcus Boone. Their tiny group, jokingly nicknamed the Lanterns by Boone, worked quietly to gather evidence. Body cam footage, audio logs, public complaints, even testimony from former officers willing to speak off the record. Adam focused especially on the Hernandez case. It was the clearest example of the corruption they were fighting, and the family deserved justice. One evening, as Adam reviewed more reports in his garage, Lila burst in, breathless and excited, waving a flash drive. "You need to see this," she said, her voice trembling slightly. Adam closed his laptop and plugged in the drive. A video loaded, body cam footage, timestamped 2 months ago. It showed officers Drake and Milner, two of the untouchables, approaching the Hernandez family's home. The footage caught them laughing about making life difficult for certain families. Then, without cause, they ordered Mr. Hernandez to show ID and threatened to call immigration if he didn't comply. The worst part was how casual they sounded, like it was just another day's work. Adam sat back, rubbing his jaw. "This is it," he said quietly. "This is what we needed." But Boone, who had been watching from the doorway, frowned. "It's a start," he said. "But one video won't be enough. They'll say it's out of context or call it a misunderstanding." Adam knew he was right. If they wanted real change, they needed a mountain of proof, not a handful of pebbles. The next step was riskier and harder. They would need to speak to the Hernandez family. Late one afternoon, Adam parked discreetly a block away from the Hernandez home. Lila was already waiting nearby, blending into the crowd at a local farmer's market. Boone kept watch from a bench across the street, pretending to read the newspaper. Adam approached the small brick house cautiously. It was clean, with flower pots on the porch and a child's bicycle leaning against the side. A place that spoke of pride, family, and hope. He knocked gently. The door opened a crack, and Mr. Hernandez peered out, his face wary. "Mr. Hernandez?" Adam said softly, flashing his badge without much ceremony. "My name is Detective Reynolds. I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm here because I believe you've been wronged." There was a long pause. Then, slowly, the door opened wider. Inside, the air smelled of warm tortillas and fresh soap. Mrs. Hernandez stood in the kitchen, wiping her hands nervously on a dish towel, while 2 children peeked around the corner with wide, uncertain eyes. Adam kept his voice steady and kind. "I know it's hard to trust anyone wearing this badge," he said, "but some of us, not many, maybe still believe in protecting people, not hurting them." Mr. Hernandez studied him carefully, searching for any sign of deceit. Finally, he nodded and motioned Adam inside. Over cups of strong coffee, they talked. Adam listened more than he spoke, letting Mr. and Mrs. Hernandez share their story, the random stops, the intimidation, the feeling of being watched wherever they went. They had come to Clearwater to build a better life for their children. Instead, they had found fear. When they finished, Adam leaned forward. "I want to help you," he said. "But it might get noisy before it gets better. I want to ask you to take risks you're not comfortable with." Mrs. Hernandez's eyes filled with tears, but she straightened her shoulders. "For our children," she said in a firm voice, "we will stand." Outside, Boone gave a small nod of approval from behind his newspaper. Across the street, Lila offered a tiny, encouraging smile. Adam felt something settle in his chest, a quiet, determined hope. They had a case. They had witnesses. They had truth on their side. But even as he drove home that night, Adam knew the hardest part was still ahead. Powerful men would fight to protect their positions. Good officers would be forced to choose sides. The town itself might turn against him. But none of that mattered now, because sometimes the only way to heal a place was to shine the light exactly where the shadows wanted to hide. And Adam Reynolds had never been afraid of the dark. The next morning at the precinct, Adam Reynolds felt the shift the moment he walked through the door. Conversations halted when he passed. Eyes that once greeted him warmly now darted away, cold and suspicious. The whispers had started. Someone knew. Adam stayed calm, keeping his face neutral as he headed to his desk. He wasn't surprised. In a place like Clearwater, secrets had a short shelf life. Still, the speed of it unsettled him. At lunchtime, as he sat in the break room pretending to browse his phone, Sergeant Cal Morrison, one of the department's oldest and most respected officers, slid into the seat across from him. Cal was a mountain of a man with a voice like gravel and a heart that had once been as solid as his handshake. But years in the system had made him careful. Maybe too careful. "You stirring things up, Reynolds?" Cal asked, voice low. Adam didn't look up. "Just doing my job." Cal gave a soft grunt. "Word to the wise," he said, leaning closer. "There are some rocks in this town you don't want to kick over. You might not like what crawls out." Adam met his eyes, then steady, unwavering. "Maybe that's exactly why they need kicking," he said. Cal sighed, a long, weary sound. "You got guts, kid. But guts won't save you if the brass decides you're a problem." With that, he rose and walked away, leaving Adam alone with his cold coffee and growing resolve. Later that day, Adam, Lila, and Boone met at their safe spot, an abandoned community center on the edge of town, now just a skeleton of peeling paint and hollow echoes. Boone, never one to waste time, spread out their findings across a dusty table: footage, signed statements from the Hernandez family, and copies of old complaints that had been quietly buried by higher-ups. "It's enough to make a case," Boone said, tapping the pile. "But we'll need to go public." Adam nodded. If they brought it only to internal affairs, it would get buried again, or worse, used against them. No, they needed eyes on it. Eyes too big to ignore. "I know a reporter," Lila offered. "Named Sarah Keene. She's not afraid of a fight." Adam thought for a moment, then agreed. They didn't have many friends left in Clearwater, but maybe, just maybe, they could count on the truth. That evening, they met Sarah in a quiet diner 2 towns over. She was younger than Adam expected, with sharp eyes and a steady hand that didn't flinch when he handed her the flash drive. As she skimmed through the files, her face grew tight with anger. "This is bad," she said at last, voice low. "Real bad." Adam watched her carefully. "Will you run it?" Sarah smiled grimly. "I'll do more than that. I'll make sure it lands where it matters. State investigators, national outlets, the works." Relief rippled through the group, but it was short-lived. Sarah leaned forward, lowering her voice. "But listen, when this drops, it's going to blow back hard. They'll come after you. Harder than you expect." Adam met her gaze without blinking. "Let them." That night, as Adam drove home, he noticed a black SUV parked half a block from his house. It was empty, its windows tinted too dark to see inside. Adam parked around the corner instead and walked the rest of the way through backyards and alleys, his instincts sharpened. When he finally reached his front door, he found an envelope taped to it. No stamp. No address. Just one word scribbled across the front in messy handwriting. "Stop." Adam stood there for a long moment, the cool night air pressing against him. He didn't need to open it. He knew what it meant. He also knew one thing with absolute clarity. He wouldn't stop. Not when innocent families were living in fear. Not when the badge he wore, the badge he believed in, was being used as a weapon instead of a shield. Adam Reynolds had made his choice. And no threat, no whisper, no warning would change it. The storm was coming. And this time, he would stand in the center of it, unshaken. By sunrise, the whole town seemed to buzz with invisible electricity. Adam Reynolds felt it even as he sipped his morning coffee, a tension in the air, thick and humming. The article had dropped. Sarah Keene had kept her word. Not only had she released the story to a major newspaper, but she had also coordinated with a state news station. By breakfast, Clearwater's dirty laundry was being discussed across living rooms, office break rooms, and radio shows far beyond their quiet streets. The reaction was immediate. At the precinct, officers gathered in uneasy clusters. Some glared at Adam with open resentment, others avoided his eyes altogether. But a few, the ones he had hoped still existed, nodded at him in quiet, cautious solidarity. Still, Adam knew better than to think it was over. Chief Rollins called an emergency meeting. The entire department was herded into the main hall, where the chief stood stiffly at the front, flanked by a few senior officers, including Drake and Milner. Adam stayed near the back, arms folded, face calm. Rollins cleared his throat, his voice heavy with barely concealed anger. "This department is under siege," he began. "By people who would rather tear us apart than stand together." The words dripped with accusation, but Rollins never said Adam's name. He didn't have to. Everyone knew. "There will be an internal review," Rollins continued. "State investigators will be arriving by the end of the week. In the meantime, I expect every officer to conduct themselves with loyalty and professionalism." Adam almost laughed at the irony but kept his face carefully blank. After the meeting, as he moved through the halls, Drake brushed past him roughly, muttering under his breath, "Traitor." Adam didn't rise to it. He had no interest in playground insults. But he wasn't naive either. He knew the real fight wasn't with words. At lunch, Boone and Lila met him at a small park across town. Boone looked unusually grim. "They're digging," Boone said. "Trying to find dirt on you." Adam shrugged. "Let them. They won't find anything." "You're clean," Lila said, worry in her voice. "But that doesn't mean they won't make something up." Boone leaned in, lowering his voice. "And Hernandez family? They're scared. They've already had someone parked outside their house 2 nights in a row." Adam's heart tightened. They had known retaliation was a risk, but hearing it confirmed stung worse than he expected. He stood, pacing the small grassy patch in front of them. "We have to protect them," he said. "They trusted us." Boone nodded. "I'll stay with them at night. I'll make it look casual. And I'll keep the pressure on," Lila added. "I've got contacts in the mayor's office. Not everyone's happy about what's happening." Adam smiled faintly at his two friends. They had no badge to shield them, no union to defend them, just their word and their courage. That night, Adam stayed late at the precinct, finishing reports and pretending everything was normal. He knew his presence made the others uncomfortable, but that was part of it, to remind them that truth didn't hide. As he packed up to leave, he found a note slipped under his office door. This time, it wasn't a threat. It was a simple, handwritten sentence. "Thank you for standing up." No signature. Adam stared at it for a long moment, feeling something tighten in his chest, a knot of emotion he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Someone still believed. Maybe more than one someone. And that was enough. When he finally stepped outside into the cool night air, he found Chief Rollins waiting by his car. For a moment, neither man spoke. Then Rollins approached, hands tucked behind his back. "You could still walk away, Reynolds," he said quietly. "Transfer to another town. Take a commendation. Clean start." Adam met his gaze. "I'm not leaving," he said simply. Rollins' jaw tightened. "You're making enemies you can't beat." Adam shrugged lightly. "Maybe, but I can look at myself in the mirror." Rollins studied him for a long moment, then turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows. Adam unlocked his car, slipped behind the wheel, and sat there for a while, hands resting on the steering wheel. Outside, the town lights flickered gently against the dark sky. The battle lines had been drawn. Tomorrow would be harder. The pressure would grow heavier. But Adam Reynolds was ready. Because when you believe in something, truly, deeply, you don't back down. Not for fear. Not for comfort. Not even for survival. And Adam had never been more certain of what he stood for. The truth. Justice. And the people who still believed in both. The sun had barely risen when the first news vans rolled into Clearwater. Their antennas stretched toward the sky, reporters bustling to capture the story that had cracked wide open. State investigators arrived shortly after, stern, methodical, and impossible to intimidate. Adam Reynolds stood quietly on the precinct steps, coffee in hand, watching it all unfold. There was no joy in him, no smugness, just a steady calm, the feeling that at last, the truth had found its voice. Inside, the atmosphere was electric. Officers who had once swaggered down the halls now kept their heads low, their conversations clipped and wary. Chief Rollins' office door stayed shut, blinds drawn tight. By noon, the first suspensions were announced. Drake and Milner were among them, their badges and guns collected without ceremony. Adam caught a glimpse of Drake being escorted out. Their eyes met, not in anger, not in triumph, but in a heavy, complicated silence. A chapter ending, one way or another. At a press conference that afternoon, the state lead investigator addressed the public. "We are committed to restoring integrity and accountability to Clearwater," she said. "Effective immediately, an independent oversight committee will be established. No one, and I repeat, no one, is above the law." The words washed over Adam like a tide. This was what he and Boone and Lila had fought for. Not glory, not revenge, change. When the press conference ended, Adam slipped away to a small house on the edge of town, the Hernandez family's home. Mrs. Hernandez answered the door, her eyes wary at first. But when she saw Adam, her face softened into a teary smile. Without a word, she pulled him into a hug, her small frame trembling. Behind her, Mr. Hernandez nodded, their children peeking shyly from behind his legs. "You saved us," Mrs. Hernandez whispered in broken English. Adam shook his head gently. "You saved yourselves," he said. "You just needed someone to stand with you." As he left their house, a strange emotion bubbled in his chest. Hope. Real hope. Days passed, then weeks. The town didn't change overnight. Some old habits clung stubbornly, and there were still hard stares when Adam walked down Main Street. But something was different, undeniably different. Young officers approached him now, quietly, respectfully, asking for advice, asking how to do better. The Oversight Committee set up regular meetings with the community, and slowly, the wounds began to mend. Boone and Lila continued their work behind the scenes, gathering support, organizing outreach programs for immigrant families. And Adam? Adam stayed right where he was. Each morning, he put on his badge with quiet pride, not because it made him powerful, but because it reminded him of his promise. To protect, to serve, to stand when it would be easier to sit. One evening, as he walked home from the precinct, he found a small package waiting on his doorstep. Inside was a simple wooden plaque, hand-carved and slightly uneven, but beautiful. It read, "Integrity is doing the right thing, even when no one is watching." No signature, just a reminder. Adam smiled to himself and placed the plaque inside, right by his front door, where he would see it every time he left for work. The storms had come and gone. The threats had risen and fallen. But the truth, real, stubborn, shining truth, had weathered it all. And now, Clearwater had a chance. A real chance. Because sometimes, all it takes is one person willing to stand up. One good cop, refusing to look away. One voice, brave enough to say, "Not here. Not today." And that's how real change begins, not with grand speeches or headlines, but with quiet, steady courage. The kind that never asks for thanks. The kind that simply does what's right, no matter the cost. 1 year later, Clearwater was almost unrecognizable, not because it had grown bigger or flashier, but because the undercurrent of fear had finally lifted. The Hernandez family thrived, their small bakery becoming a cherished part of the community. Every morning, the smell of fresh bread and cinnamon filled the air, and Mrs. Hernandez greeted customers with a bright, genuine smile. Boone officially joined the oversight committee, bringing his quiet wisdom and stubborn fairness to every meeting. Lila started a nonprofit to support immigrant families, working closely with the town to build bridges that had once seemed impossible. And Adam Reynolds? He remained a detective by choice. He mentored new recruits now, teaching them not just how to enforce the law, but how to serve with heart. In every conversation, every decision, he carried the lesson that had reshaped his life. Justice isn't about winning. It's about standing for those who can't stand alone. On quiet evenings, as he passed by the old precinct or walked through the town square, Adam often paused to take it all in, the laughter, the conversations, the simple, everyday peace. Clearwater had found its way back to itself. Not perfectly, not easily, but truly. And sometimes that was the greatest victory of all.